Hello, wanderer. It's Ufan. Come in. Tonight, before we go anywhere else, I want to ask you something. Not to answer right away, just to hold on to, the way you'd hold something small in a closed hand. What have you been carrying alone that you could set down tonight? We're going somewhere very old tonight. A narrow stone window. A candle. A woman who has been sitting behind that window for longer than either of us can quite picture. She's holding something in her hand too, tonight, something small enough to almost disappear. We'll get to it. Everything gets to you eventually if you let it. For now, just come in and let your shoulders drop the half-inch they've been holding up all day. Let's begin. The day had been long in the way most days are long. Not one large thing, but 100 small ones, stacked without anyone quite deciding to stack them. A conversation that hadn't gone the way it should have. A worry that had been set aside that morning and picked back up somewhere around mid-afternoon, heavier for having been carried before. By the time the light started to go, the visitor was walking without much sense of where the walking was headed, just a vague pull towards somewhere quieter than the noise inside their own chest. The city had that particular hush that comes right before rain, not silence exactly, but a lowering, as if every sound had agreed to take up less room. Shutters were being pulled too. A dog somewhere gave up barking halfway through, as though even it had decided the effort wasn't worth it tonight. The visitor's breath came a little shallow, the way breath does when a body has been holding itself upright against something all day without noticing the holding, and then, slowly, without any decision being made about it, that breath began to loosen. In, out a little deeper each time, the way the chest softens once it realizes no one's demanding anything else of it. There had been a name mentioned earlier, passed along the way names are passed along in small cities, half rumor, half certainty. Go and find the anchoress. Saint Julian's. She sits at a window in the wall and she doesn't turn anyone away, not even at night, not even in the rain. It had sounded at the time like exactly the kind of thing a tired person tells themselves to have somewhere to walk toward. But the feet kept moving anyway, one street narrowing into the next, past a baker's stall going dark, past a church bell that rang some hour nobody was quite tracking anymore. The rain arrived the way it had been threatening to all evening, not a downpour, just a soft, steady weight of it settling onto shoulders already tired from carrying other things. Oddly, it didn't feel unwelcome. There was something almost kind about it, a thing falling on everyone equally, asking nothing, expecting nothing, just falling. The eyes grew heavier with each street crossed, the way eyes do at the end of a long day when a body finally gives itself permission to stop pretending it isn't tired. The eyelids weren't fighting anymore. They were simply settling, the way rain settles into ground that's been dry too long, slow, unhurried, welcomed, somewhere ahead, past a scatter of low stone buildings gone soft and grey in the wet dusk, was a wall. And in that wall, small and easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, a window. The visitor didn't know yet what waited on the other side of it, didn't know about the candle or the small round shape being turned over and over in an old, steady hand, or the voice that would ask nothing and notice everything, all that was still a few footsteps away. For now there was only the rain and the narrowing street and the strange, settling sense with each slower breath, each heavier blink, that whatever had been carried this far didn't have to be carried much further alone. The rain had been falling since before dark. the kind that doesn't announce itself with thunder, just arrives and stays, softening every hard edge of the city until Norwich felt less like stone and more like something underwater. The visitor had walked the last mile with a coat pulled high and a collar doing very little, past shuttered stalls and a bridge slick black with wet, following directions given twice because they hadn't quite believed them the first time. Go to the church of St. Julian. There's a small window built into the outer wall. She'll be there. She's always there. It seemed like the kind of thing people said about a place, not a person. And yet here was the wall, old, uneven, patched in places with newer stone that hadn't yet learned to match the old. And here, low and small, was the window. Not a window built for looking out of, a window built for someone to be reached through. A curtain moved on the other side of it. Not drawn back exactly, just shifted, the way a person shifts when they've heard footsteps and are deciding whether to be found. You can come closer, a voice said. The rain doesn't stop just because you're standing in it politely. The visitor came closer. Up close, the window was smaller than it had looked from the street, barely wide enough for two hands to pass through side by side, and behind the mesh screen that covered it, in the dim gold of a single candle, there was a face. Not young, not old in the way that suggests frailty, either, a face that had settled into itself the way old wood settles, not soft, but not resistant anymore. Eyes that found the visitor's face and did not look away from it, the way most eyes do within a few seconds, out of habit or discomfort. These eyes just stayed. "I'm Julian," she said, as if this needed saying, though of course it didn't. "Sit, if you like. There's a stone bench just there, worn smooth by people doing exactly what you're about to do." The visitor sat. The stone was cold through the coat, but the cold was almost a relief, something solid and simple after a day that hadn't been either. For a while neither of them said anything. This was, apparently, allowed. Julian didn't fill the silence the way people usually do, rushing to close the gap with a question or a comment about the weather. She simply waited, the candlelight moving very slightly with her breathing, and in her hand the visitor noticed this only slowly. The way you notice a sound that's been present for a while before you realize you're hearing it, she was turning something small between her fingers. Round, no bigger than the width of a thumb. She turned it over and over, unhurried, the way someone worries a coin in a pocket without meaning to. "What's that?" the visitor asked, mostly to have something to say. "A hazelnut." She held it up, just slightly, into the candlelight, and it caught the gold there for a moment. Small, brown, utterly unremarkable. The kind of thing that falls from a tree in autumn and gets stepped on without anyone noticing. "It was shown to me once. Or, that's not quite right. It was given to me to look at. In my hand, the way it is now, small enough to almost disappear. Shown to you by who?" "That's the question that took me 20 years to answer properly," she said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't quite a laugh, but lived somewhere near one. "We'll get there. I don't rush that part. It rushes badly." The visitor almost smiled. There was something disarming about a person who admitted right at the start that they weren't going to hurry, that the whole shape of the conversation had already been decided, unhurried, and there was nothing to do but sink into that decision. "You didn't answer my question, though," Julian said. "Not the one about the nut. The other one, the one you've been carrying since before you knocked on this wall. The visitor's chest did something complicated, not quite tightening, more like being noticed. Being seen carrying something before admitting to carrying anything at all. I don't know what you mean. You do, Julian said gently, no accusation in it, none at all. Just a fact laid down the way you'd lay down a blanket, careful not to let it catch on anything sharp. Everyone who finds this window at night is carrying something. Most people don't say what, not at first. That's fine. I'm not asking you to say it now. Then what are you asking? Nothing yet. She turned the hazelnut once more. Slow, unhurried. I'm just letting you know I can tell it's heavy. Whatever it is. You've been carrying it long enough that you've stopped noticing the weight. You've just started thinking it's the shape of your own arms. There's a particular kind of tired wanderer that doesn't come from one bad day. It comes from 100 ordinary ones, each one asking you to hold something just a little longer, just until things calm down, just until there's time. And there's never time. So the weight becomes part of you. You stop setting it down because you've forgotten it was ever something separate from your own hands. If that's you tonight, you're not imagining it. It really is heavy. It's just been heavy for so long that heavy started to feel like normal. The rain went on outside, unhurried as everything else here seemed to be. Somewhere beyond the wall, a bell rang once, distant, marking some hour nobody in this small stone space was keeping track of. I used to think, the visitor said slowly, surprising themselves a little by speaking at all, that if I just held on tight enough, things would eventually be, I don't know, manageable, that the holding was temporary. And is it? No. The word came out smaller than intended. It's not temporary at all. It's just what I do now. Julian nodded, unbothered, unshocked, as though this were the most ordinary confession in the world, which perhaps behind enough windows like this one it was. That's what most people are carrying when they find their way here. Not one crisis, a slow accumulation. A thing they picked up once, meaning to set it down later, and later never quite came. So what do I do? Tonight? Nothing. She said it plainly, almost amused, the candle flickering slightly as she shifted her weight on her side of the wall. You don't have to solve it tonight. You don't have to solve it ever, really, not the way you think you do. Solving isn't always the shape the answer comes in. That's not very reassuring. It isn't meant to be reassuring in the way you want it to be, Julian said. And here, for the first time, there was real warmth in her voice, not the practiced kindness of someone performing comfort, but something that sounded like she meant every word of it and had meant it for a very long time. You want me to tell you it will all be fixed by morning. I won't tell you that, because I don't believe it, and you wouldn't believe me even if I said it. But I can tell you something truer than that. Something that took me most of my life to actually trust. What's that? She held up the hazelnut again, into the light, turning it slowly so every side of it caught the candle for just a moment. This little thing, she said, is easy to overlook. It's small. It could be crushed between two fingers without much effort at all. It could fall into the dark and be lost, and no one would ever go looking for it. It's not worth going looking for, by any ordinary reckoning. And yet, she closed her hand gently around it. It lasts. It goes on existing, small and unremarkable as it is, for the simple reason that something larger than it has decided to keep holding on to it. Not because it earned that, not because it proved itself, simply because it is loved, and love doesn't require an accounting. The visitor looked at the closed hand, at the faint outline of small knuckles around something the size of a thumb. I used to think, Julian went on, quieter now, that things had to prove themselves worth keeping. That love was a kind of reward for being impressive enough, or good enough, or strong enough to carry your own weight without complaint. I carried that belief for a long time. It's a heavy one to carry, as it turns out, heavier, in its way, than almost anything else. What changed? I got sick, she said simply. Very sick. Sick enough that everyone around my bed believed I was dying, myself included. And in that state, not asleep, not quite awake either, somewhere in between the two the way you might be starting to feel right now, I was shown this. She opened her hand again, and the hazelnut sat there, unchanged, ordinary, patient, and I understood something I hadn't understood in 30 years of trying very hard to be good enough. I understood that I didn't need to hold myself together. I was already being held. The rain eased, very slightly, outside, not stopping, just softening, the way conversations do when they've found their real subject and no longer need to search for it. That doesn't mean nothing bad happens, Julian added before the visitor could ask. I'm not telling you a story where nothing ever goes wrong. Plenty goes wrong. I've seen enough of it, in this window and outside of it, to know that. What I'm telling you is something else. Something about what's underneath the wrong things, whether or not you can feel it from where you're standing tonight. And what's that? Julian didn't answer right away. She set the hazelnut down carefully on the stone ledge between them, not through the window, not yet, just visible there, small and unhurried in the candlelight, and for a moment let the silence hold the question the way she'd been holding the nut. We'll get to that, she said finally, and there was no evasion in it, only pacing, the pacing of someone who had learned, slowly, painfully, that the deepest comfort can't be rushed toward. It has to be arrived at. You've been carrying something a long time, and it deserves more than a quick answer shouted through a window in the rain. Stay a while longer. There's no one waiting for this window but you tonight. And the visitor, coat still damp, the stone still cold beneath them, found surprisingly that there was nowhere else they wanted to be. The rain had settled into something almost rhythmic now, a steady patter against the old stone that neither of them tried to talk over. Julian hadn't touched the hazelnut since setting it on the ledge. It sat there between them, small and patient, catching the candlelight whenever the flame leaned one way or the other in some draught neither of them could feel. You don't have to tell me what it is, Julian said after a while. I want you to understand that first, before anything else. I'm not going to sit here waiting for a confession. That's not what this window is for. Then what is it for? For company, she said simply, while you find your own way to whatever you're circling. Most people already know what they're carrying somewhere underneath. They just haven't said it out loud yet, even to themselves, because saying it makes it real in a way that carrying it silently doesn't. The visitor looked down at the hazelnut, at the stone, at the small dark shapes rain was tracing down the wall outside the window's edge. I don't even know where it started, they admitted, finally the words coming slower than intended, as if each one had to be located before it could be spoken. It's not one thing, it's everything, a little. Things I said I'd handle and didn't. Things I should have let go of years ago and haven't. A version of myself I thought I'd be by now that I'm not. That's a great deal to hold in two hands, Julian said, and there was no pity in it, just a plain acknowledgement, the way you'd remark on the weather. How long? I don't know. Long enough that I've stopped being able to tell where I end and the carrying begins. Julian nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. I asked God something very like that once, she said. Not in those words, but close enough in spirit. I asked why any of it had to happen at all, the failing, the falling short, the things we carry that we never meant to pick up in the first place. It seemed to me, lying there as sick as I was, that if love were truly what was underneath everything, none of that should have been allowed to happen. Wouldn't a love worth trusting have prevented all of it? What did you hear back? Nothing, at first. That's the part people leave out of these stories, the not hearing. I sat with the question a long while before anything answered it, and even then, the answer wasn't the kind you could repeat easily to someone else, because it wasn't really made of words. It was more like being shown something rather than being told it. She paused, choosing carefully. What I understood eventually was that the falling itself isn't outside of the love. It's not a failure of the love or a place the love hasn't reached yet. It's already inside it. Sin is, behovely is the old word I used for it. Fitting, necessary, in a way I couldn't have explained cleanly even then. Not something to be ashamed of hauling around, something already accounted for, already held, before you ever picked it up. The visitor turned this over slowly, the way Julian had turned the hazelnut. That sounds like a very generous way of forgiving yourself for things you haven't actually forgiven yourself for. A small huff of breath from the other side of the window, not quite a laugh, but close kin to one. You're sharper than most who come to this window at night. Most people accept the comfort without pushing on it first. A pause. You're right to push. It isn't meant as permission to stop trying. It isn't none of it matters, so carry on as you were. It's something quieter than that. It's you were never, even at your worst falling, outside of what was holding you. The falling didn't put you somewhere love had to travel back to find you. You were already there. There's a particular kind of exhaustion, wanderer, that comes from believing you have to earn your way back into being okay. As if falling short moves you out of some circle, and now the work is finding your way back in. I don't think it works that way. I think the circle was always wider than the falling. I think you've been standing inside it the whole time, even on the nights you were most convinced you weren't. You don't have to prove anything to be let back in tonight. There's nothing to be let back into. You're already there. The visitor was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the rain had thinned to something almost soft, more mist than downpour now, beading on the old stone sill without quite running down it. "Can I ask you something?" the visitor said finally. "Always, have you ever carried something you couldn't set down? Something you knew, even while you were saying all this, even while you believed it, that you still couldn't quite let go of?" Julian was quiet long enough that the visitor wondered if the question had overstepped. Then, slowly, "Yes. There's a wound I carry that I don't think will ever fully close, not in the way people mean when they talk about healing. I watched. I was shown, in that same sickness, a great deal of suffering, not abstractly, closely, and I have spent most of my life since trying to understand how something could be permitted to hurt so much and still be held inside a love worth trusting. And did you understand it? No, not the way I wanted to. I didn't get the explanation I asked for, the clean one, the one where every piece of the suffering gets accounted for and makes sense in the end. What I got instead was smaller and, I think now, better suited to actually living with. I was told, shown, again more than told, that nothing was being hidden from me out of cruelty, that the wound itself wasn't proof of abandonment. It felt, at the time, like being handed something I hadn't asked for. It only became a comfort much later, once I stopped trying to make it answer the original question. The visitor looked at their own hands, turning slightly in their lap, and found, without quite meaning to, that they were thinking of their own wound. The one under all the smaller carried things, the one that didn't have a clean explanation either. I keep thinking, the visitor said slowly, that if I could just understand why it happened the way it did, why I handled it the way I did, why I still can't put it down, that understanding would be the thing that finally lets me set it down. Like the weight is really made of confusion, and if I could just clear the confusion, it rarely works that way, Julian said gently. I wish I could tell you it did. I spent 20 years turning over the same question, waiting for the day the answer would arrive complete, and it never did, not in the shape I wanted. What arrived instead was something closer to trust than to understanding. Not trust that I would eventually get the explanation. Trust that the explanation wasn't actually the thing holding me up all along. Then what was? Julian reached for the hazelnut again, lifting it gently between two fingers into the low gold light. This, she said. Not the nut itself. The nut is nothing, really. It's not magic. It doesn't do anything on its own. What it showed me was the shape of something else. That a thing can be small and fragile and entirely unable to explain or defend or account for itself and still be kept, still be held onto, gently, by something that doesn't need it to have earned the holding first. The candle guttered slightly, steadied, somewhere beyond the wall. The last of the bells for the hour finished their count and fell quiet. You don't have to solve your wound tonight, Julian went on, quieter now. You don't have to understand the whole shape of what you're carrying before you're allowed to feel some relief from it. That's a trade a lot of tired people make without realizing they're making it. I'll rest once I understand. But understanding isn't actually the door. It never was. The door is smaller than that and much closer than you think. What is it then, the door? Julian didn't answer right away. She set the hazelnut back down on the ledge, gently, precisely, the way you'd set down something you trusted wouldn't roll away. We'll come to that, she said. You're not ready to walk through it yet, not because you're not capable, but because you haven't finished putting the weight down enough to have your hands free for it. Stay a little longer, the rain isn't finished, and neither, I think, are we. The visitor exhaled, a longer breath than any before it, the kind that seems to come from somewhere lower than the chest, and settled back slightly against the cold stone, no more answers than before, and somehow unaccountably lighter for it. The rain had settled into something so soft it barely registered as rain at all anymore, a fine mist more felt than heard, beading on the sill, on the mesh screen, on the edges of the visitor's coat, where it had long since stopped trying to keep anything out. Inside the small stone room, The candle had burned down enough that its light had changed character, gone rounder somehow, warmer, throwing less shadow than it had an hour before. "Can I ask you something else?" the visitor said. "Something that isn't really about the door yet." "Of course. Earlier you said God showed you all this while you were dying, and every time you talk about it, you use words like held, kept close. It doesn't sound like the way most people talk about faith. It sounds almost," the visitor searched for the word, domestic, "like you're describing a person who tucks you in at night, not a distant judge weighing things." Something shifted in Julian's face, not surprise exactly, more like recognition, the particular warmth of someone hearing their own private conviction said back to them in someone else's words. "You've put your finger on the part that took the church the longest to forgive me for," she said, and there was real amusement under it now. "Yes, that's exactly it. I don't have a good modern word for what I mean, but the old word I used was homely. Close, familiar, the way a room you've lived in your whole life is close and familiar. Nothing about it has to announce itself to you. Nothing about it makes you nervous. It simply is, all around you, holding you without appearing to try. That's not how I was raised to think about it. Whatever it is, whatever's underneath things." "Most people weren't," Julian said. "Most people are handed a version of it that looks like a father standing at a great distance, arms crossed, tallying. And there's truth buried somewhere in that image too. I don't discard it entirely, but it isn't the whole of it, and I don't think it's even the center of it. What I was shown was closer to a mother, not because the words matter more than what they're pointing at, but because a mother is the one image most of us already carry inside us of someone who holds you before you've done anything to deserve holding, who feeds you before you've asked, who stays close not because you've earned closeness, but because closeness is simply what she does. Not every mother is like that," the visitor said quietly, and there was an edge under it, something old and a little raw. Julian didn't flinch from it. "No," she agreed. "Not every mother in this life manages it." "I know that. I'm not describing the mothers you've known. I'm describing something truer than any one of us has managed to be. The shape underneath all our failed attempts at it. The love that doesn't get tired, that doesn't run out partway through the night, that doesn't require you to be easy in order to stay close." The visitor said nothing for a moment, turning that over, feeling something in the chest loosen slightly and then, cautiously, tighten back up, unsure whether it was safe to loosen further. "It's a nice idea," the visitor said finally. "I don't know that I trust it." "You don't have to trust it tonight," Julian said, unbothered. "Trust isn't something you decide all at once, like flipping a coin face up. It's something that gets built the way water shapes stone, slowly, from staying close to something long enough to let it work on you. I didn't trust it either, not at first. I sat with the vision for years before it stopped feeling like something that had happened to me and started feeling like something I actually believed." She reached for the hazelnut on the ledge, but this time, instead of turning it in her own fingers, she held it out through the narrow gap in the mesh, resting in her open palm. "Here," she said. "Hold it a moment." The visitor hesitated, then reached, and the small weight of it settled into their palm, lighter than expected, warm from Julian's hand, unremarkable in every way except that it had clearly been held for a very long time by someone who had decided it mattered. "It's just a nut," the visitor said, half a question. "It's just a nut," Julian agreed. "That's rather the point. It doesn't have to be extraordinary to be worth keeping. Neither do you." That's the part people find hardest to believe. Not that something magnificent could be loved, but that something small and plain and a little worn down by carrying itself around too long could be held just as closely, just as unconditionally, without needing to become something else first. There's a particular kind of relief, wanderer, in being close to someone rather than impressive to them. Most of us spend so much energy trying to be worth the room we're standing in, worth the attention, worth the closeness, that we forget closeness was never the reward for being impressive. It's simpler than that, and stranger than that. It's just being let near, being fed before you've asked, being kept warm without having to prove first that you deserve the warmth. If tonight you're tired of trying to be impressive, you're allowed to just be close instead. The visitor closed their hand gently around the hazelnut, feeling the small, hard shape of it against the palm, and something in the chest, not fully, not all at once, but a little, let go. You keep saying held, the visitor said. Held, kept, close, but I don't feel held. Most days I feel like I'm the one doing all the holding, holding myself together, holding everyone else together, holding on to whatever I can reach so I don't slide. I know, Julian said, and her voice had gone very soft now, no performance left in it at all. That's the particular loneliness of believing you're the only one doing the holding. It's exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with how strong you are. You could be the strongest person who's ever sat at this window, and it would still exhaust you, because it was never a weight meant for one set of arms. Then whose arms was it meant for? Both, Julian said. Yours and something larger than yours, at the same time, not instead of yours, not so you can finally put your own arms down and do nothing, but held underneath your holding. The way this stone bench holds you while you sit here thinking you're only sitting. You're not doing the work of staying upright right now. The bench is doing that. You've simply stopped noticing because it's been under you the whole time. The visitor looked down at the hand curled gently around the hazelnut, then out at the mist, then back at Julian's face in the low gold light. Steady, unhurried, the eyes that didn't look away. I don't know how to feel that, the visitor admitted. I understand the words. I don't feel the thing underneath them. You don't have to feel it tonight, Julian said. Understanding it first is more common than people admit. The feeling tends to arrive later, quietly, usually when you're not trying very hard to produce it. Some nights it arrives while you're falling asleep. That's not a coincidence, I don't think. The mind lets go of its grip right before sleep, and sometimes in that small gap, something truer gets to slip in that couldn't get past the grip while it was tight. The rain had nearly stopped now, just the faintest hush of mist against stone, more felt than heard, the city outside gone soft and distant and unimportant. Keep it a while longer, Julian said, nodding toward the hazelnut still closed in the visitor's hand. You don't have to give it back yet. There's no hurry to any of this, not the understanding, not the feeling, not the letting go. All of it comes in its own time, usually slower than we'd like and gentler than we expect. The visitor's fingers loosened slightly around the small shape, not letting go, just resting, holding without gripping. And for the first time all night, that distinction seemed to mean something. The mist had stopped now entirely. What remained was a stillness so complete it seemed to hum faintly, the way silence does after a long sound finally ends, the ear still listening for it out of habit. The hazelnut sat warm and small in the visitor's closed hand, forgotten and not forgotten at once, the way a held breath can become simply part of how you're breathing. "Can I tell you what I'm actually afraid of?" the visitor said. The words came out lower than before, without the careful distance that had shaped everything said until now. "Please, I'm afraid that even if all of this is true, the holding, the closeness, all of it, I'll still fall. That I'll still fail at the things I'm trying not to fail at. That being held doesn't actually mean anything gets to turn out differently." A breath. "I don't just want to feel comforted. I want to know that it's going to be okay. Actually okay. Not okay in the abstract, someday, eventually sense. Okay in the sense that matters." Julian was quiet for a long moment, and in that quiet there was none of the earlier lightness. This was a different kind of stillness, the kind that comes before something true rather than before something clever. "I asked for that too," she said finally. "Almost exactly that. I lay there, certain I was dying, and I did not ask politely. I asked God directly. If you are truly love all the way through, how can any of it be permitted? The failing, the falling short, the suffering that doesn't seem to serve anything at all. I wanted a promise, not a feeling. A promise with teeth in it that things would actually turn out well." And? "And I was answered," Julian said, "though not in the way I expected, and not with an explanation of how. What I was given instead was a phrase. It came to me not as one sentence, but as something closer to a held note, repeated, each time the sound settling a little deeper into me than the last." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, slower, plainer, stripped of anything performed. "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well." The visitor sat with that, turning the hazelnut slightly inside the closed hand, feeling the small ridges of its shell. "That's it? That's the whole answer?" "That's the whole answer," Julian said, and there was no defensiveness in it, only a kind of hard-won plainness. "I wanted more too, believe me. I wanted the mechanism. I wanted to be shown exactly how each hard thing would resolve, so I could hold the explanation the way you're holding that nut right now, something solid, something I could keep turning over until it made sense. I didn't get that. I got a promise instead of a plan. And for a long time, that felt like being shortchanged." "What changed?" "I stopped needing the plan," Julian said simply, "not all at once. Slowly, the way most true things arrive. I came to understand that all shall be well was never meant to describe the absence of hard things. It doesn't mean nothing goes wrong. I've watched things go wrong. I've carried grief that never fully closed the way I told you before. The promise was never that the hard thing wouldn't happen. It was that the hard thing would never, at any point, be happening outside of what was holding you. You don't fall out of the well nest to get to the hard part and then have to climb back in once it's over. The wellness was underneath the whole time, holding the hard thing too." "That sounds like a very careful way of saying nothing at all. I understand why it sounds that way," Julian said, unoffended. "It sounded that way to me too the first several years. But sit with it a little longer than a first hearing allows. It isn't nothing. It's the difference between being told a storm won't come, which would be a lie, storms come regardless, and being told that whatever this storm does, it cannot put you anywhere outside of what's holding you. The first promise is false comfort. It breaks the moment weather actually turns. The second one doesn't break. because it was never about the weather in the first place. I want to say this to you plainly, wanderer, because I think it's the part most easily missed at this hour, half asleep, listening in the dark. Some nights the honest comfort isn't this will be fixed. It's smaller than that, and it holds up better than that. It's just you are not alone in this, whatever it is. However long you've been carrying it, you are not out there somewhere holding it by yourself while everything good stays somewhere else, waiting for you to finish. You are already inside the thing that's holding you, even now, even mid-fall, even not knowing how any of it resolves. That's not nothing. On the right night, at the right hour, it's the only thing that actually helps. The visitor's hand, still closed around the hazelnut, had gone slack somewhere during the aside, not dropped, just loosened, the grip finally trusting the thing inside it to stay without being held tightly. I still don't know how it turns out, the visitor said, quieter now. The thing I've been carrying. I still don't have an answer for it. I know, Julian said. You may not have one for a long while yet, possibly not for years. That was true for me too. I carried my hardest question for the rest of my life and never did get the tidy resolution I originally wanted. What I got instead was something I trust more now than I would have trusted an answer. I got the certainty that not knowing didn't mean not being held, that the two things, the unresolved question and the being kept safe, were never in conflict with each other. They were happening at the same time, in the same hands. How do you live with that, not knowing, for that long? The same way you're managing to sit on this bench right now, Julian said, and there was warmth again, quiet and real. Not by solving it, just by staying, by letting the not knowing be present without letting it be the only thing present. There was still bread to eat, still rain to listen to, still a window to sit at, some nights, with someone who'd walked a long way in the wet to find it. The not knowing didn't stop any of that from also being true, right alongside it. The visitor opened their hand slightly, looking down at the hazelnut resting there, smaller somehow than it had felt an hour ago, though nothing about it had changed at all. I keep waiting to feel different, the visitor admitted. Lighter, fixed, and I don't. Not really. Not yet. You won't, not tonight, Julian said gently. That's not a failure of tonight. Understanding doesn't unmake the weight all at once, and neither does hearing the right words at the right window. What happens, usually, is smaller and slower than that, a loosening, degree by degree, the way your hand has loosened around that nut without you quite noticing it happen. You came here gripping. You're sitting here now, holding. That's not nothing. That's most of the distance, actually, though it won't feel like much of one from the inside. The candle had burned low enough now that its light barely reached the far corner of the small stone room, though neither of them seemed troubled by the dimness. If anything, it suited the hour, suited the quiet, suited the particular kind of talking that happens better in low light than bright. I am keeping you very safe, Julian said, so softly it was almost lost beneath the last of the rain's drip from the eaves outside. That's not a promise I'm making up tonight for your comfort. It's the promise I was given, and it's the one I've spent my whole life since trying to actually believe, one long night at a time. You don't have to believe it fully tonight either. You just have to let it sit next to you a while. the way that nut has been sitting in your hand, small, unproven, and somehow, despite everything, still here. The visitor breathed out, long, slow, the kind of breath that seems to release something held far below the ribs, and closed their eyes for just a moment against the low gold light, feeling, for the first time all night, something that wasn't quite peace yet, but was standing very close to it. The rain had stopped entirely now, not the sudden stop of a storm breaking, but the quiet kind, the kind you only notice once you realize you've been listening to silence for a while without registering when the sound underneath it had gone. Somewhere beyond the wall, water still dripped from an eave, unhurried, marking time the way the bells had earlier, except gentler now, less like a measurement and more like a small song winding down. The visitor sat with the hazelnut still resting in an open palm, no longer gripped, no longer even quite held, simply present there, the way a stone might rest in a riverbed, shaped by everything that had moved over it and worn smooth by none of it being an emergency. I should let you rest, the visitor said, though there was no real hurry in the words. You've given me most of a night. I don't sleep the way you do, Julian said, and there was gentle amusement in it. This window is my whole life in its way. You haven't taken anything from me that wasn't already given freely, a long time ago, to whoever might come find it. She paused. But you're tired. I can hear it in you now, not the tiredness you walked in with. A different kind. The kind that comes after setting something down, even part way. I don't know if I've set it down, the visitor admitted. I still have the same things waiting for me tomorrow, the same conversation I handled badly, the same version of myself I'm not yet. That's true, Julian said, without flinching from it. None of that dissolves because you sat at a window in the rain for a night. I never promised you it would, but something has shifted, even so I can hear it. You came here believing you had to carry everything alone and hold it tightly and prove something with the holding. You're not believing that quite as fully now, not fully released from it, just loosened. That's not a small thing. That's usually where the real change begins, quietly, long before it's visible from the outside. The visitor looked down at the hazelnut one more time. Small, brown, ordinary, exactly as unremarkable as it had been the first moment it caught the candlelight hours before, and yet entirely different now for having been held through everything that had passed between them. Do you want it back? The visitor asked. No, Julian said. It was never really mine to keep, any more than it's yours. I think you already understand what to do with it. Slowly the visitor set the hazelnut down, not through the window, not back into Julian's waiting hand, but on the wide stone ledge between them, in the same place it had rested at the very start of the night. A small, deliberate motion, not a giving up. A setting down, the way you'd set down something you trusted would still be there in the morning, exactly as it was, still held, still kept, whether or not a hand was closed around it. Julian looked at it there a moment, then back at the visitor's face, and something in her own expression had gone very soft. You didn't need to carry it away with you, she said. That's rather the whole of what I've been trying to say all night, said now with your own two hands instead of my words. It was never about gripping tightly enough to keep something safe. It was always already safe. You could set it down, and it would still be exactly as loved as it was in your palm. The visitor stood, slowly, joints stiff from the cold stone bench, coat still faintly damp, though the worst of the rain had long since passed. There was nothing dramatic in the movement, no sudden lightness, no visible transformation, just a body standing up the way bodies do, a little more settled in itself than it had been on the way down. Will you be here? The visitor asked. If I need to come back? I'm always here, Julian said. That's not a boast. It's simply what this window is for. Some people come once. Some people come for years, a little at a time, the same question wearing a slightly different shape each visit. Both are welcome. There's no schedule to any of this, no deadline by which you're meant to have finished carrying what you're carrying. The visitor nodded, throat a little tight in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. Before you go, Julian said, let me say the thing properly. Not the shortened version I've been offering you piece by piece all night, the whole of it, the way it was given to me. The candle had burned low, its light gone almost amber now, steady, despite having no more draft to flicker against. You are loved, Julian said, not because of anything you've proven tonight or any night. You were loved before you walked here, wet and tired, and certain you were carrying more than your share. You will be loved tomorrow when the same hard conversation waits for you, unresolved. The love was never contingent on the carrying going well. It was underneath the carrying the whole time, holding both you and the weight, whether or not either of you noticed. The visitor said nothing. There was nothing left that needed saying, only listening, only standing in the low light and letting the words settle the way rain settles into dry ground, slow and thorough and entirely without hurry. Go gently, Julian said, not because the road is easy, because you don't have to walk it as though it might collapse under you at any moment. It won't. You are kept, even on the streets, even in the dark, even carrying whatever you still haven't managed to fully set down. Especially then. The visitor turned, finally, toward the narrow street and the walk home, quieter now, the city hushed in the aftermath of rain, puddles holding faint reflections of windows still lit here and there in the dark. The hazelnut stayed behind on the stone ledge, small and unremarkable and entirely unafraid of being forgotten, because it had never needed remembering to remain what it was. Behind, through the small window in the old stone wall, the candle burned on low and steady for whoever might come looking for it next. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Whatever you've been carrying alone tonight, wanderer, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Set it down, if only for these next few hours. It will still be there in the morning, and so, gently, unhurried, will you. Sleep now.